Welcome to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Join us as we dive into the world of endurance sports, exploring everything from nutrition to training and how these elements shape your everyday life, both on and off the race course. Hosted by Coach Justin, certified run and triathlon coach and owner of Tabula Rasa Racing, along with Coach Katie, a registered dietitian specializing in sports nutrition and owner of Fuel to Run. We're here to share insights and real-world advice to help you thrive on your journey. Here at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast is where your journey begins. Welcome, everyone, to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. I'm your host, Coach Justin. I'm here with Coach Katie, and today this is episode 38. And we are talking about the difference between exercising for fitness and training. So these are very specific methods and mindsets that we as coaches use to help our athletes. It's just something that we feel is important to talk about. And so I don't really know else what to say. I'm kind of like just blanking out here. It's kind of early in the morning.
We were talking, so it was like 7 when we started talking my time. And It was funny because it was still dark here. Like the sun is just coming up. So it's like that time of year where it's just dark. And you're like, gosh, it looks dark there. And I'm like, yeah, it's pretty dark. So it's hard. I think I'm waking up now. I have some coffee, but it's definitely a little earlier than we normally record. So hopefully we'll be able to get through it just fine.
Yeah.
You're deep into training. So you're a little bit in that state of like tired, and I don't know, you can say what.
No, I'll be honest. I mean, today is kind of a struggle bus kind of day in terms of motivation. Physically, I feel okay. Like my run went okay last night. But today I have like a 4.5 hour bike session with like a 30 to 35 minute run off the bike. So I still have 5 hours of training to do. And so I was up early this morning. I was doing training plans for my athletes. And then, we logged on together and started talking. Wanted to wait for the sun to come up a little bit so we can see you a little bit better on camera.
Yeah.
Plus, it was 35 degrees here this morning, and now it's at a balmy 42. So I'm not interested in being on the bike at 42 degrees.
That's rough. That's hard this time of year to train for.
That was one of the things that I was really concerned about for picking Ironman Florida, because it's December 14th, and I don't live in Florida, so I don't get the opportunity to train in Florida weather, which would allow me to ride outside and run outside all the time. But I'm hoping that some of my long rides are not going to be relegated to the trainer, because that is brutal. That 4.5 hours on a trainer, just sitting there staring at a TV, just playing music or whatever, just trying to be motivated. That's a whole nother level.
It's like a treadmill for a long run or something, like similar kind of situation where. I got what you're saying.
I'm kind of lacking in motivation today. I really don't want to go out and work out. But it's got to be done.
Well,
I know I'll feel better once I'm in it. Once I kind of jump on and just the hardest part is just getting started. So
I just gotta get out there, and then once I'm there, I'll be fine. It's hard, but so the topic. So I feel like we talked a little bit. Would you say what the topic was, or are we jumping in quite yet?
I said what the topic is. So it's episode 38. So we're talking about the difference between exercising for fitness and training. So let's start off the conversation by let's define what fitness is. And what we're going to do is Katie's going to define what she believes from her perspective, what training is and fitness is.
Yeah, I want to just also first say, I looked it up, what the definition of fitness is, because I feel like this is interesting, because depending on who you're talking to, it's going to be different. So what I say and what Justin says is different. But what the dictionary says is that the condition of being physically fit and healthy, which is like, okay.
I don't think that you can use the same word within the definition itself.
Yeah,
so fitness is physically fit. What does that mean? So
definition from Oxford Languages here. I mean, I Googled it, so no for sure. But the quality of being suitable to fulfill a particular role or task. Yeah, so that is what that definition says. I'm not going to dig too much further, but I just was like interested. I'm like, what Google say it is, and that was the dictionary definition, which I don't think really gave any
No.
any light to it. So let's
That's like
let's dig
saying what
into
is
our own
happiness is
definition.
when you're happy.
Yeah,
So that doesn't really
it's
help.
like the condition of being happy. Okay, thank you.
That was
I
helpful.
don't know. So let's dig into our own. Do you want me to go first?
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay.
Go first.
Yeah, I think it is sort of difficult to define in some ways because it may depend a little bit. But my definition is just the ability to do like, various tasks, like to be able to almost like, because you have different like types of fitness. You have like cardiovascular fitness, you have like strength. So it's not, I think you can be fit in one of those areas and not the other. And so I think general fitness is just kind of being able to be good at a variety of things, I suppose. So like running, for instance, like, I think if somebody can get into a 5K and be able to run the whole thing and feel relatively good, but maybe they're not going as fast as they can, or they're not trying to win the race or do a really fast time, because that's not really exactly what they're training for. And we're going to talk about the difference between fitness and training, like something like that, where you can get into, even do like a mile, run a mile fairly comfortably, right? Like you have some cardiovascular fitness, or if you can't run, like, just generally being able to, go for a hike or something like that, where you can get out and you can do something slightly physical and you're not totally winded and totally sore. And the other thing would be like sort of that strength piece, like being able to like lift your kids up, into the air, pick them up, or like carry groceries. So like some of that functional piece. But I think that involves a little bit of, maybe doing some strength training of some capacity, maybe not like heavy weights, maybe not powerlifting program, but just some sort of general strength training. So just being able to like go out and do some, something physical, like a hike, or just pick someone up, a child up, or just doing those types of things and being able to do it without pulling your back out, or, totally being in a ton of pain the whole time. That's my sort of definition of it. And I also think there could be an angle with it of like longevity too. Like I was talking with Justin offline a little bit about that idea. And it's kind of came from Dr. Peter Attia's podcast. I listened to that, but it's like the centenarian heptathlon or something. He sort of defines like when I'm 70 or 80, I want to be able to do these functional tasks. So you're sort of almost training for general fitness so that you're able to be able to get to 70 or 80 and still be able to be doing something physical, be able to play with your grandkids and those types of tasks. So like I think fitness, it's hard to define. I also hear people talk about it in like VO2, in terms of like VO2 max, like what's your VO2 max, and a lot of research studies use VO2 max as a definition, but I don't think that's not capturing other aspects of fitness. So
right.
I don't know, I feel like I get it because studies have to use some sort of measurement, right? But like I think it's just being able to move throughout your day, and do certain things, like jump into a 5K, be able to complete it. Maybe it's not fast, but you did it, or be able to, pick things up, pick a big rock up, go outside, work on your yard without totally being like the next day unable to move, just generally like that sort of general fitness is the way I define it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. It's maybe similar, but maybe different.
Fitness to me is the ability of someone to control the movements of their body. For instance, I could be working with a runner, but if I sit there and I ask them, I'll say, I want you to do these one-legged box stands. So they sit down on a box and I make them stand up using only one leg. We're looking at, strength in, just the glutes and just being able to do that one-legged movement. They may not be able to do that movement well. So to me, would I say, okay, do we need to work on some level of basic fitness where we're teaching the muscles that they need to engage in order for us to stack other things on top of it? So to me, fitness is going to be something like where, I can ask you to walk down the street and you don't have low back pain or, knee pain and all this other kind of stuff, that's outside of kind of like structural weaknesses within the body. If you have, degenerative discs in your back, well, that explains it. But if you don't have something like that, but you still have low back pain, well, it's because, you have weak core. So to me, that is kind of the starting point on, defining physical fitness. Can we walk upstairs without being completely winded and having to stop? How many staircases can we climb without, until we reach that point of saturation where it's like, I can't do this anymore, or I can't catch my breath. To me, those are kind of the ideas of just general fitness, being able to get through daily life activities with the least amount of pain as possible. I know as we get older, that is a harder thing to accomplish. I'm definitely, a walking billboard for that. But it doesn't mean that I'm not physically fit. There's just, the differences that we see across the population. We're all not structurally built the same way. So, I usually am far from using, benchmark comparisons when I start talking about fitness. The idea of using that VO2 max, the way that I see VO2 max is more of a capacity measure. This is your capacity to take in oxygen and utilize that oxygen. And we can use VO2 max. It's just a single number to rank us in terms of who's better at utilizing oxygen than others. To me, that's what VO2 max is. But I would never use it to define on whether somebody's physically fit, so whether, I don't know. I tend to not use those metrics in defining fitness. I know that that's kind of an odd thing to say from a coach. Well, then it's like, well, then how do you define
measure?
fitness?
Yeah, how do you?
I can define fitness based on just qualitative descriptions on how you feel while doing a particular activity. I don't need to know, hey, I'm able to press this much weight in a flat bar bench. I'm able to, curl these dumbbells and use this kind of weight. I'm able to run, this mile at this pace with this cadence. I'm able to generate this amount of power on the bike. To me, that doesn't really define fitness. Now, we use those when we progress the conversation into training, which is why I really wanted us to talk about this topic, because when we make that transition from fitness to training, then the method changes. And so, let's talk about a little bit then, like if you had somebody come to you and they say, hey, I want to get into running. What would be, and you have the consultation, and you guys, you feel like you can work well together, and you become this person's coach. What is kind of like what does your first month look like with this athlete? If they come to you and say, hey, I want to learn I want to get into running, so set me up a method to get me there.
Yeah, so I would actually see kind of where they're at. Are they even running at all? Like I haven't, because then it would be some sort of run walk program, usually with a little more walking and running to start. So like, okay, we're gonna start you with a little bit of a 10-minute warm up. You're just walking, and then I want you to run and depending on where this person's at, that run portion could maybe be even 30 seconds. Like it's not going to be very long, maybe a minute. And then there's going to be, a significant walk portion, maybe a couple minutes, and then another little run. And then that slowly progresses up. So like as they're getting more comfortable in the running piece, the running portion of that slowly goes up. And that's just a run walk program that, I gradually increase over time to the point where this person will eventually be able to run maybe like 30 minutes without stopping, right? It's a very gradual progression, but that's generally how I start. I find that when somebody wants to start running, if the way most people go about that is they're like, I'm going to start running. I'm going to try to run a mile. And then they run and it sucks. Like running freaking sucks. When you're not running and you're not in shape, it's hard. And then people hate it. And that's why people don't like running. People are like, I can't be a runner. I hate running. That's because you probably either were made to run, you were doing some other sport, and they made you run as punishment. And now you're associating running as punishment. Or you decided you wanted to try to start running, and then you're like, went for a run after, when you haven't been running and it sucks and you're in pain and you're breathing hard and everything sucks about it, right? And then you're like, I hate running. And that is absolutely not what I want for somebody who's coming to me. Like I want people to eventually get to a point where maybe they don't love running as much as I do, but they appreciate it and they enjoy it enough that they'll continue to use it as a fitness method, especially if they're just coming to me to be able to run and they're not coming to me to maybe perform like a K at a certain time, but they're just generally wanting to be able to start running more, maybe be a little more fit. I want them to enjoy this process. I think most coaches would hopefully approach it that way, because I really do think if you're like, okay, go try to run for like 30 minutes or a mile even when you have a man, like that's one way to really get someone to hate it. And that's bothers me a little bit. So yeah, that's generally how I approach it, kind of a very easing into it. And I think people are like, well, like, I don't know how that's going to help. And I'm like, trust me, because it's like
Yeah.
your body starts to get used to the running. Like you are gaining fitness slowly by doing this. And you're going to get to the point where you can comfortably run a certain amount of time and it's not going to suck. It sucks. It might hurt a little bit. It might be hard, but it's not going to be like totally miserable, and then over time, as you're able to run longer, maybe then we work on have making it so it's just easier to run. Like maybe we're, like it's not so hard. Maybe we're working on other aspects of it so you can run 30 minutes and overall pretty comfortably. And that could be part of your fitness routine if that's what someone's looking to do. So that's kind of how
Yeah.
I approach it. How about you?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. That would be close to the approach that I would use with somebody who came to me and says, hey, I want to do a sprint triathlon, and I've never done this before, but I'm pretty active, and so that tells me right off the bat, it's like, okay, well, if they're active, there is some level of base fitness that this person, the general base fitness that they already have. They may not have sport specific fitness, but they are able to do certain things, and that allows me to have some kind of assumptions about them. And then we start to kind of just introducing them to the sport. And I love the way that you described it. It's like it's a progression, and it requires a lot of patience. And I know that sometimes I see out, with other people, the patience thing is where they're kind of lacking. They're just like, I've seen posts where it's just like, hey, I've been running for 2 months now. How do I get faster? Yes. I was like, whoa, 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 hold on a little bit. And so I like the way that you described it. There's a very popular program that's very similar approach. It's the Couch to 5K. If you go and Google it, you'll find a very similar method, well accepted. There's a lot of science behind it. One of the things that I do want to say is that continuing to use the approach, like like, I don't want to say the run walk is a bad approach. It has its purpose and it has its time, but I believe if you continue to prescribe to that method, you will hinder your development and progression. So there is a time to graduate from that,
You'll be
because
able to run
yeah,
like a full time frame, so you don't need to maybe do as many walking breaks at some
yeah.
point, right? Yeah.
Because what
Yeah.
I see a lot of people is like, well, I want to be able to go and run a half marathon, but they haven't gone through the progression of, 5K, 8K, 10K. They've kind of skipped that whole progression, and they're just like, well, I can cover 13 miles if I run walk. But I was like, well, why would you want to do that? Why don't you take the time and build up to that and go through the natural progressions of developing your running, so that when you get to the half marathon, it's not going to be as painful as it's going to be if you force yourself to go from nothing to 100.
Yeah, I think that's a common thing. People want to
It's
just
very common.
skip all the steps and go right to it. But I also think, honestly, that's a very sure way to, I mean, I think people can do it and then maybe they end up having good longevity in the sport. They really get hooked. But I also think when we decide we're going to go from 0 to, half marathon or like a marathon, marathons are all of a sudden, it seems like to me, becoming even more popular. It's just this everybody wants to do one. Well, when you skip all the steps in between, you're going to run the marathon. I just think that's not a really good way to have like longevity in the sport. You're just getting through it, right? And it's like you've skipped all the steps, you're trying to get ahead, and it's just a surefire way, I think, to kind of burn out. Like, okay, I did my marathon, but you haven't done all the steps in between to really like kind of appreciate how you got there. And I think that, some people I think
Yeah.
maybe then do continue to run, but I do think that a lot of people kind of do it and then they're done, right? And they're like, I'm done. That was hard. That sucked. Well, it probably sucked a lot because you didn't do all the steps in between to get to the point where, I mean, marathons are hard. Don't get me wrong. I oftentimes think after I'm done, I don't want to do another one, but then I sign up,
Yeah.
because most of it was actually kind of enjoyable, right? Like until I got to mile 20, and then it was hard most of the time. But when it's hard from mile like halfway through the rest of the race, like yeah, you're wanting to do another one is going to be really, your motivation for that is going to be really low. Versus if you've sort of taken the time to build up your fitness and done the 10K and done all the, sort of steps in between and gave yourself like a good amount of time to train, and not 6 months, but starting from 0 to 6 months or something like that. But going from, okay, 3 years, 2 years from now, I want to be able to run a marathon, but I want to run a marathon like all the way through,
Yeah.
like not, I'm going to run and walk. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that for people who to enjoy or maybe have physical limitations or something, but it's like, what, you know, I just think people are setting themselves up for these goals, these big, I love people having big goals, but let's take the time to kind of get there so that you
Yeah.
can enjoy it, and you can really look back at the process and be like, wow, like it did all of these things, I've gotten here, and I really it was great, and I it wasn't like, oh, that was terrible. So that's my thoughts on it too. I'm kind of with you on that, is, if I have somebody coming to me who wants to do that, I have to kind of figure out where their motivations are for it. And I'm a little hesitant to be like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. Like, and then I think also that type of person maybe is more likely to not follow through. I don't know. Like maybe they're ambitious, and then when they start to realize what it really takes to get there, if they haven't done all the steps in between, because you're having to do some pretty long runs and you're out there for a while for a marathon anyway.
Hmm.
Like I kind of question, are they going to follow through? Because that's a lot to do. It's just a lot of work. So yeah,
Yeah.
those are my thoughts.
So let's change. So I think that this is an interesting topic or discussion that we've had so far, where we've introduced the idea of, if somebody's coming to us and they have a particular goal in mind, whether that be just, I want to run a 5K or I want to get into running. Both of us seem to be on the same page in terms of like, there is a natural progression that we're going to have to go through in order to get there. We have yet to talk anything about performance-based metrics or anything like that. Neither one of us have talked about, well, you need to run at this pace, you need to run with this kind of cadence, you need to do hills, you need to do track Tuesday, all this kind of stuff. Neither one of us has said anything about those.
I think it's just because that's where the fitness piece comes in. Like before
Right.
you even
It
start
comes
training,
later.
you
Yeah, but
have to be physically fit
yes.
enough, right? So it
Yes.
doesn't matter what your cadence is, or I mean, not right at the beginning, because you're just trying to get the movement down. You're just trying to be able to run and then comfortably somewhat, or do the walk run program and get to a point where you can run for some specific time frame and not be totally winded. The basic fitness piece.
Right.
And then once you've kind of accomplished that, then all the other and then the discussion
Yeah.
on the metrics and the cadence and heart rate and all that stuff might come in, I think, more at that
So
point when you've
let's
kind of
step it.
mastered it a little bit more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
let's step it back one step and let's change the scenario now to where somebody comes to you and says, "Katie, I'm interested in becoming more physically active. This is my daily life. These are the demands that I have on my time. This is kind of like where I'm at in terms of my general level of fitness. I want you to make me fitter." No, and both of us know kind of like, okay, well, that's kind of abstract. What does fitter mean? And then they say, well, I'm not adverse to running, but it's not like I want to become a runner. I don't have the goal of, hey, I want to do a 5K, I want to do a 10K or a half marathon, but I'm not adverse to running. Can you come up and help me become more fit? What would your approach be then with that athlete? And we can compare that to the approach that you would use with somebody who came to you with a specific purpose in mind and a particular
Oh,
goal in
yeah,
mind.
so I think sometimes like it's just trying to get an idea of what like I think goals are hard because I do like to kind of ask people like what is kind of motivating them, or is there something that they're trying to like be able to do, and it doesn't have to be like a goal, like a specific thing. Sometimes a goal for somebody could just be like, you know what, I'd like to be able to run without my Achilles pain, my
Mm,
Achilles flaring up, or I'd like to be, every time I start, I don't really want to become like a runner, so to speak, but I'd like to be able to go out and do some running because I know it's a great activity for fitness and maybe burning calories, whatever their motivation is to do it. But I just, every time I do more than 30 minutes or I do more than this many days a week, I get an Achilles issue start to flare up. Or maybe it's something like my kids are very active. I want to be able to run with them, play tag, and I'm really having a hard time. I'm winded. So sometimes it's just trying to get to the bottom of what, like, they might not have a goal like we define it as an athlete. Like, I want to run a 5K in this time. I
mhm,
want to do lift this much, but it's we're trying to kind of really get to the bottom of why are they coming to me? There's something that has prompted them or has motivated them to reach out to me to maybe put something together for them to help them. And what is it? What is it that, and it may not be, because I think when I say goal, people think, oh, that then they're thinking it has to be like a defined thing. Like I'm going to run this fast for this time, or, or this
yeah,
amount distance, and I'm going to do this. And I think sometimes goals can just be something like pain free or increased ability to play with kids. And so then I'm creating the plan based off of what their motivation or what's kind of going on with them and what they're trying to accomplish. So if it's to be pain free, but they want to run a little bit more to be, be able to run and use that as a fitness tool in general, physical activity tool, then maybe we're sort of thinking about how we can structure that program so that, or what are we doing in terms of some strengthening of the Achilles or just things around the why is it like why? Like let's like first of all, I'm like, okay, we need to figure out why this is happening. And then we'll structure the training around that. So maybe some strengthening things regarding the Achilles, the calf, that kind of stuff to help them be able to endure a little bit more running because maybe that's not strong, And so or if it's like playing with their kids, let's structure in some run walk stuff and maybe like lifting, some basic body weight lifting or whatever they have available to them to be able to have a little more strength so they can play with their kids and run around and maybe pick them up or whatever. So it's when someone's coming to me, I just really it's because it's otherwise, it's like you can give someone a little fitness plan, put in some various things, but sometimes, you know, that maybe not actually accomplishing what they're setting out. Like they may not even really exactly know. So it's just an interview process of or a discussion of like, what is
mhm,
it? Like, what do you want to be able to do? So that's kind of how I would approach that situation. I think I answered that question, but
yeah,
I think the word goal can be a variety of different things. And for somebody who's maybe not training for something specific, it could be a subjective thing or something they're wanting to do pain free, or it could be, oh, I want to be able to hike this mountain, and do it without being so sore the next day I can't I can't get out of
right,
bed, or whatever. So there's so you're just trying to get to the bottom because everybody's reasoning for wanting to be more fit. There's always something that they're trying to do. There's a why there, right? So
yeah. I think a lot of times if somebody were to come, what I see is there's been some kind of, I don't want to say scare, but there's been some kind of event that has triggered some emotion, whether that be, you have somebody who is the same age as you and they're going through a health scare and it freaks you out. And now you're just like, you know what? That could be me. And so I need to do something to make me feel like I have a less chance of it being me. And that seems to be, I think, a driving thing,
yeah, that makes
when
sense.
it
Like you have
comes
some like
to people
a heart
doing that.
attack. not you, but maybe
Yeah.
somebody you love,
Yeah.
like
Somebody
you
you know that's the
see
same age
that.
as you or same position as you.
Or yeah, or
Or
I
you
even think of
have,
an example. I have an
yeah.
example of somebody that so I work in a hospital as a doing some clinical work, PRN, so not every day, maybe once or twice a week. And I had a woman that I visited with, and she'd had a heart attack. So she had like a cabbage, I think, where they kind of go in and they um bypass. It's like almost like a bypass of the arteries. So she had this procedure or this surgery done. It's pretty major surgery, but I was talking to her, and I'm a dietitian, so I don't know what this, but I don't know if she was looking at me. I don't know, but she was like, you know what? I really want to be able to like be stronger. She was like showing me her arm, like she's like, I've
Hmm.
lost all this muscle. It's all like not flabby, but it was skin.
Yeah.
And she's like, I want to be stronger, and I want to be able to be healthier. I have all these grandkids. I don't know how old she was. She didn't look too old, but she had kids and grandkids, and so her motivation was there. And she's like, what can I do? And I'm like, I'm happy to like, share that. But she'd had this major surgery. I'm sure it was a big scare. It was actually her second one. So big deal. And she was wanting to be better. So obviously for her to go, there's like cardiac rehab. So it's like, you probably need to go, obviously do it in a safe environment. But yeah, I mean, like using bands, I was kind of just talking to her about basic fitness, like being able to walk around, do some walking, go to the cardiac rehab, but maybe buy some bands. But that's like an example. Like sometimes something very major happens to somebody and
Hmm.
they're like, wow, this, this is a this is scary, and then they're motivated, right? So
Yeah.
that is just an example I had from a very recent discussion with somebody. So it could be that, or it could be just watching somebody else that you love go through something and be like, I don't want this to happen to me, or yeah. So
Yeah, I think if somebody were to come to me and said, I'm interested in becoming more physically fit. I really don't have a burning desire to do a triathlon or anything, but can you just make me generally feel better? It would be a very different approach than what I would use, if somebody came to me and says, I want to do my first sprint triathlon. So a lot of my focus then would be, okay, well, what, like you said, what is your why? Why is it that you want to do this? And I want to make sure that why is strong enough to keep you motivated, because us as coaches, it's not our job to provide you motivation. To a certain extent, it is our job to find ways to keep you engaged with not necessarily like all these like complex and interesting workouts and things like that, but it is our job to try and find things that you enjoy doing so that you have more of a likelihood of actually doing them. If I coach an athlete and it's just like, this is something that we have to do in order to achieve this, then that's a conversation that I have to have with the athletes. Like, okay, well, are you willing to do this? Because if you're not willing to do this, then we need to think about what it is that we're trying to achieve and where we're going, because this is a sufficient and necessary condition that has to be met in order to get there. And so I think a lot of my focus then would be just kind of introducing basic aerobic and non-aerobic conditioning, whether that mean, hey, we're going to develop I am a huge, huge supporter and believer in strength training. I've lived through what happens when you ignore it and focus solely on the aerobic conditioning. I firmly believe that many of my overuse injuries has not been the result of poor form and hasn't been the result of too much volume. I believe that some of my overuse injuries are the result of lack of strength in order to support the demands that are required from the volume that I want to do. And it's the lack of strength to ensure that I can have good form. So I don't think that it's the bad form that causes it. There's an underlying condition there that I don't have the strength to support good form. So if I get stronger, then I can have better form, and then I can train like I really want to. And so one of my approaches with an athlete then would be, we really need to focus on finding your weaknesses strength-wise. So we would go through an assessment and, introduce some basic movements and say, okay, I'm going to look on how you're performing these, and this will tell me where you're weak. And then I can say, okay, now I know where you're weakest. Now let's find those movements to build that strength and correct those imbalances. Because we have to lay the foundation before we build the house on top of it. And I think of the aerobic conditioning as the framing of the house, and that's the actual construction part. But the strength is so vital and so crucial, because without it, the house is not going to stand very long. And I'm living proof of that to this day. And so if we can find a way to correct those imbalances, build the strength, and then slowly kind of like introduce the aerobic part, I think that there's an important aspect where we have to have strength and aerobic work in the plan. But I'm not going to say, hey, we're going to do this strengthening conditions, and we're going to, do these runs, we're going to do these bikes and all this kind of stuff. I may say, we're not running for at least a month, but we're going to do stuff that will mimic the run stride, and we're going to work on stuff that is going to build the strength that you're going to need to run. So that may mean that I'll develop a strength plan for them, and then to get the aerobic side of it, we may do some walking, because walking is the foundation of running. So, we'll say, I'll give you some some functional strength conditioning walks like you can do on a treadmill if you enjoy that kind of environment. It keeps you engaged, you're upping and lowering gradient, and you're changing pace. And so it's not this whole dreaded treadmill workout, because you're doing stuff to keep you engaged throughout the whole session. And then I'll say, okay, in order to get the heart rate up a little bit more, let's introduce some elliptical stuff. And we're going to start with, a couple sessions where we're holding on to the sides, to the handles of the elliptical. And we're just kind of, gliding along. We're going to do some interval based. So it's going to change intensities throughout so that we're not just sitting there and mindlessly zoning out, because I really want you to develop this ability to be in tune with what your body is saying to you in that moment. And then we graduate. It's like, okay, now we're going to remove the hands from the handlebars of the elliptical and really force you to develop that arm swing and that core engagement and develop balance. Because if you have poor balance, then it's really hard to be a consistent runner, because the way that the foot makes contact with the ground, if your body weight shifts, then things start to, you may start to roll that foot a little bit more, and then that will stress out some of the tendons that are in the attachment areas, and that's where you can get some of these Achilles issues, and you can get some knee imbalances, with pain in the knee is actually most of the time driven by imbalances in glute engagement in the hips. So if we can create some stability in those areas, then the knee problems usually kind of go away and they kind of fix themselves. So somebody comes to me and says, I want to learn how to run, but I have bad knees. Well, who told you you have bad knees? Because a lot of doctors and PT people will say, running is bad for you. It's bad on your knees. It could be furthest from the truth. There are people that maybe running is not a very good idea because they may have some structural issues with the knee, but in general, running is not bad for the knees. If anything, it actually improves the condition of the knee. Then I say, well, if nobody's told you that you have bad knees, but your knees hurt, well, let's find out why they hurt. And then it could be driven completely from lack of stability and engagement in the hips and the glutes. So if we can fix that, then we fix the knee problem, and then they can start running again. So I think that there's the reason that I'm saying this is that a lot of people just kind of like jump into an activity because it's what they want to become or it's what they want to achieve without really thinking about the groundwork that has to be laid first. And, developing this general baseline fitness is important. And the approach that we would use to build that is going to be very different than the approach that we would use if somebody came to us and said, hey, I want to train for this. So I think to this point, we've covered the idea of what base fitness or, general fitness is and how we would approach that and bringing an athlete along. So now let's change the conversation to then what is training? There is some structure to building base and general fitness, but it's different than the structure that we would use for somebody who's training. So here's a scenario for you, Katie. It's like, somebody comes to you and says, I want to run a sub 2 hour half marathon. This is the performance in my last half marathon. I ran it in, let's say like 2:05, 2:10 or something like that. So I want to shave 5 minutes off and get sub 2. What would your approach be with that athlete to achieve that specific and particular goal?
So they're wanting to run, you said a sub 2.
Yeah, sub 2 half.
2 hour or a half. Yeah. I think that changes, right? Because now we have a time goal. There's like a very specific goal that they're wanting to accomplish. So then, and I'm assuming I'm going to, make the assumption here that they have been training. They're able to run mostly that half, most of it, so they have, yeah, that basic, obviously you said kind of basic fitness already. Um, yeah, then it's more of the conversation of like, okay, what are we gonna implement to get you faster? And so there's going to be more of a structure, very specific, training. Now, it's not to say that maybe we won't have some sort of strength component to it to keep somebody strong and prevent injury. It's just that maybe that shift, you're saying when you first work with someone who's just trying to kind of get that base or they're preventing injury, you're kind of working a lot on strength. That may be a component that would be a little bit less emphasized, but still there. And then it's kind of building in the running program around that, like trying to figure out like how often can the athlete run, because we're that person wants to get faster at running, so we're going to do a lot more running, right? And maybe there'll be some cross training in there, maybe there'll be some of that strength just to kind of keep some general fitness, or maybe just um because they can't run you know a, s- a ton, or they want to have a little bit of cross training. That's the big emphasis is going to switch to the running piece, and then there'll be actual structured workouts that will help them become a better runner. So it changes at that point. It's not just like kind of general. We're actually looking at metrics, we're looking at pace, heart rate maybe is something that comes in. I might be asking them how they're feeling, like recovery wise. Like there's going to be, maybe I'll look at something like cadence a little bit more than I would otherwise. So there's going to be those things I'm starting to pay attention to see, okay, kind of what is going on with this particular person. Do we need to focus on a little bit more speed training? Do I need to kind of get their, aerobic fitness better? Like, do we want to try to work on more zone 2, like to try to get them so they can run a little faster in that zone 2 sort of training? I mean, it just depends on that person, but it's kind of I'm actually looking and paying a little more attention at that point to the actual metrics. And that's something that we're going to just discuss a little bit more versus like just for fitness, it's a lot more subjective. Like, how are you feeling? Like, how did that feel? Is that getting easier? Is your pain? It's very, you would move from more subjective to still not ignoring those types of things, but you're more like objective too in your metrics that you're looking at with somebody. And it becomes very much more specified, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, how about you? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that my approach would be very, very similar. I start to pay a little bit more attention to some of the performance metrics, whether that be what's their pacing. If for instance, if I give athletes treadmill runs, I completely disregard pacing right off the bat. That's just a metric that I can't rely on if they're doing treadmill stuff. So I really rely on the subjective commentary that I would get from them. But if we're doing outdoor stuff, then yeah, I do pay a little bit more attention. I also have to be cognizant of, okay, well, what was, if the pacing isn't where it really needs to be in order to achieve the ultimate pace that we need for race day, why are they not hitting that pace? Why can't they seem to hit that pace during some of the benchmark training sessions that we have? And it could be just a result of, what are the conditions that they're running in? Is it hot and humid? Or if they hilly routes, then I kind of relax the requirements a little bit for pacing. So, for instance, if one of my athletes that I would give them and say, this is the pace range that I'm looking for, because this is the adaptation that we're looking to build. This is the goal that you have. Now, you can use this pacing method, this pacing range that I have here, but if you use that, you need to run a very specific route in order to get that pace, to get within that pace range. Like, really, I would like to see them run a similar route that would be what they would be running on race day, similar elevation, similar, things like that. But if I see that their pace is slower than what I would really like, then I have to kind of dig a little bit deeper and develop the story a little bit more. It's like, oh, well, this route that they chose is a lot hillier than the route that they're going to run on race day. Does that mean that they quote unquote failed the purpose of the workout, or that they didn't perform well? Absolutely not. I actually would be happier with them if I saw the slower pace, but I saw the increased elevation, because I know that training on hills improves your ability to run hilly courses and flat courses. Training only on flat courses prepares you to perform well only on flat courses. So when in doubt, run the hillier route. You're not going to see the sexy metrics that you like, and you may not get that feeling of validation that, hey, my goal is realistic. I'm making progress because I'm able to hit these paces during training. I can almost guarantee you that if you were below your goal pace, but you ran a bunch of hilly routes, come race day and you transition into that easier route, you will be in a much better position, even though you haven't quote unquote proved it to yourself during training that you can do it and that you can hit those targets. So yeah, the specificity is what really kind of makes the difference. If somebody comes to me and says, I just want to become generally fitter, or, I want to be able to do this kind of activity, but I really have no performance metric in mind. I'm not looking for a particular result. But within that training specificity, there are different degrees and different approaches that we would use. If somebody came to me and it's like, I want to do my first Ironman, but I have no performance expectations, all I want to do is finish, then the approach that I would use with that athlete is going to be very different than the approach that somebody came to me and says, I want to do an Ironman, but this is what I want my swim to be. This is what I want my power and my bike to be. And this is what I want my run to be. My overall time expectation is this. So we have to look at transitions and, how much time we're going to spend in transition. So those are very specific methods that we would have to employ in order to generate those results. Could be very different than the way that I would approach somebody who says, I just want to finish. I just want to get to the finish. I want to get to the starting line healthy, and I want to complete it within the cutoff time of it.
Yeah, I have an example, like an interesting thought too, or example for that sort of scenario where somebody just wanting to finish versus somebody wanting to complete it in a specific time. Like I was online, I don't know, somewhere online, maybe Facebook, and there was an article from one of those running magazines or running, posting, I don't know, sites where they post stuff on running. And it was like an article about research that sort of stated, like, what is the, most like the optimal amount you should run before a marathon, maybe less than you think. And it was like something like 16 miles was what they concluded. And I was kind of reading through it and I'm like, that is interesting. Yes. Like I would say probably if you just want to finish, like, yeah, and that's kind of what it was saying. Just, it wasn't like specific to like, do you want to run it fast? To me, I kind of took it like, if you just want to finish the marathon, yes, like 16, maybe you can kind of get away with that and somehow, make it through the next 10 miles. That might be like the minimum. But there's a difference between finishing the race and completing it in a time like goal, like under 3 hours. There's no way, in my opinion, that somebody who's trying to complete that under 3 hours is going as fast as they can. Let's just say, like, you're trying to complete a marathon as fast as you can. You're really running it. And maybe you do have a time goal that's pretty ambitious. Unless you're like a really seasoned runner, like maybe, but I don't think 16 miles is going to cut it for anybody in that category. I don't. Like, I really just don't think, a lot of our pros, I mean, yes, granted they're running faster. They're running sometimes even like 22, some of them even like 26 miles ahead because they want to be prepared. Because the hardest part about that race is the last 6 miles, right? You want to be prepared for that. So yeah, if someone's coming to me and they're like, I just want to finish, maybe I will, and maybe they're running because there is a risk to running more than like 3 hours, right? So maybe they're 3 hours that gets them to 17, 16, maybe 18 miles. Well, maybe that's good enough because they're just wanting to finish. But if I have somebody that's like, hey, I want to do a 3:30, I want to qualify for Boston, I want to get under 3 hours and this is my time, I want to cut 10 minutes off. No, yeah, not going to. You're going to have to do something close to 20 miles at least once. in your training plan to get there. So I think that's an example. I want to just put that
Yeah.
out there. Like, that's just one
Yep.
I saw recently, like, because that article was misleading. And I think I even wrote that in the comment, like, yeah, there's a difference between finishing and trying to have like a fast as you
Yeah.
can kind of race.
Yeah,
So,
there's a difference between just finishing and performing,
mhm,
so that's a
absolutely,
very
yeah.
important distinction. One additional thing that I would say is that when we start to transition from building general fitness, as I said, I'm a strong believer and supporter of the strength component. Now, when we start to train, that even though we'll still be doing strength training, the approach changes and the way that we go about it, and maybe the method and the movements that we use, there's going to be a reason behind why we pick certain movements over others. For instance, before I started training for Florida, my approach to strength was, I thought that my triathlon season was done. I thought it was all cooked up and ready to go. And so I said, now that my triathlon season is done, I'm going to focus on lifting heavy to generate power and build strength. So the movements that we picked were such that we didn't pick them because, those movements are pertinent to running, or these movements are pertinent to cycling. I said, for instance, if I want to generate power, then I may do a 2-legged leg press and then really kind of like go out on it and really kind of like max it out. If I'm saying, okay, I want to do strength conditioning that will improve me as a runner or a cyclist, then a 2-legged leg press may not be the best movement to use. Then I transition and say, okay, I'm going to do 1-legged leg press, or I'm going to do supersets, because these activities that we do, they're not 2-legged activities. Our feet are not on the ground. I'm not pushing the pedals with both feet at the same time. It's one leg and then the other leg. So really focusing on improving strength that is going to be pertinent to your sport is very important. So even though, we'll say, okay, I'm going to do some strength stuff and we're going to build this base level of fitness, then I say, okay, now we're training for a race. I'm going to keep some of this strength in there, but I'm changing the movements that we're putting in because I want to put in stuff that is pertinent to the sport that we're training for. Not only are the movements important, but the method in which we use those movements are also important. So like I said, before I was training for Florida, I was looking for power. So my movements were sets of 4, 8 reps, and that was what I was doing. They were progressive overload approaches, so I could really kind of like burn out those muscles. However, when Florida started, like the training plan started for Florida, I still kept strength in there, and it's still in my plan right now, but we transitioned from power generation to muscular endurance. So even though I may be doing some of the same movements, my method now is like, okay, now we're doing 15 to 20 reps, lighter weight, still 4 sets. And so, but the specificity is there because I want to build muscular endurance. I'm not necessarily interested in generating power and strength right now. Doesn't mean that I can't return to it after the race is done, which is actually what I'm going to be doing. But right now, I have to sacrifice that method and focus on something that serves its purpose. And so I think, and that's the word that I really want to drive home, is purpose. So there's a purpose behind every workout that we do. We don't, as coaches, I don't give athletes quote unquote busy work. I'm not going to say, hey, I want you to do this session simply because I want you to have something on the plan to do that day. There is a specific purpose that I've given you that workout. I may not tell you exactly what that purpose is, but there is one behind it. Now, if you ask me, well, what's the purpose of doing this? I'm more than happy to talk about, hey, well, this is why I put it in there. For instance, I'm working with an athlete who really loves running, but once we kind of go to like 4 and 5 runs a week, his body starts to break down a little bit. And so I was like, okay, well, now we're going to keep it to 3 runs a week, but we still have some intensity in there, and there's some structure and purpose behind the plan. So I throw in some elliptical stuff in there. So it's not that I'm saying, well, I just need an aerobic piece to the plan and I need you to do something on that day. The way that I structure the elliptical sessions are in such a way that it does engage the primary muscles that we use for running. We just removed the impact from it. So I'm still getting good glute engagement when we do, for the elliptical. I tell them we're doing some forward strides and then we transition to backward strides. So we're looking at full leg engagement. So the forward strides are really going to engage those quad muscles, which are really important for downhill running. When we do the backward strides on the elliptical, it really engages the hamstrings and the glutes, which are also important muscles for running. And so that's what I'm looking for. But it's elliptical. It's not sexy and it's not technically running, but there's a purpose behind it. And so that was really kind of one of the things that I want to drive home, is that when you're looking at a plan, you look at the workouts that are in that plan. It's like, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of this session? Is it just to fill time, or is there something that I'm trying to accomplish from it? So those are my thoughts on the difference between, just building fitness versus training. Yeah. It's that introduction of purpose now.
It's not like when you're training for fitness, there's no purpose. Yeah, but I think it's more of that, like, each workout you do maybe more general. Like if you put in workouts, it's kind of more general. There may be some purpose to it, but it's not like when you start the training, there's like that piece of like, this has a very meaningful purpose towards your very specific goal. So yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I think to extend that, and it's because you are right in that, if we're working with an athlete who just wants to build fitness, there is still purpose and there's still a reason behind the workouts, but the selection of the workout is maybe a little bit quote unquote looser. So if I'm working with an athlete who just wants to build fitness, I say, okay, now we're going to do, this is the strength session. It's 40 to 45 minutes. And then as soon as you're done with that, I want at least 20 minutes of aerobic conditioning after the weight session. Now, because we're just building base fitness, I tend to just leave it up to the athlete on what they want to do for the aerobic stuff. If they want to get on the treadmill and they want to walk on the treadmill, great. If you want to jog on the treadmill, great. If you want to jump on the stationary bike and spin the legs out, great. Elliptical, great. However, if I'm working with somebody that's training for a race, I may say, we're still going to do that strength session, but this is the aerobic piece that we're going to use. So if it's a runner, I'm saying, let's do our upper body session, and then we're going to jump on the treadmill and do a zone 2 run. So even though you would say, well, both of those have a weight component and an aerobic component, but the reason on the selection of the aerobic component is very purposeful. There's a reason behind it, and you might get a little less quote unquote freedom to choose. But then again, it depends on the goals of the athlete, on what they're trying to achieve and what their body can absorb and recover from. That ultimately affects, the level of freedom within the plan per se. But I do have an athlete that I'm working with. She really likes strength training, but she likes the freedom to pick what routine that she does. She's got an in-home kind of systems, like these electronic weights and things like that. And so she likes the freedom of just selecting from a list of workouts that she can do in the comfort of her home, and then she just executes. I think that's great because there's a certain level of general fitness that we're trying to build, even though we are training for running. She doesn't have any specific goals that would require me to remove that freedom, quote unquote freedom, from her and give her what I think her strength session should be. I say, you really enjoy that? That's great. I think it's building good general fitness for you. It's going to have positive benefits on our ability to run because we don't have really any like specific run goals and nothing that we're really shooting for. We're just doing races, and she likes to see the progress that she's making, and that's perfect. Now, if she were to change and say, I want to now run this race on this time, then I may say, okay, now we're going to be a little bit more purposeful for the running, but now I want to be more purposeful with the strength stuff. I know that you enjoy it. We're keeping it in there, but if you're willing to just do the movements that I think that we should do, then we'll continue to do that. But let's be purposeful with it because I want to build adaptation and engage those muscles that are going to be relevant. And so I have a little bit more, I tighten the reins a little bit. And so I think that that's a good approach, a good analogy to use, like if you're saying, I'm looking for general fitness, you may have really wide guardrails. We've used this whole guardrail analogy before on the sides of the roads. But as you start to become more specific and purposeful with your working out, and now you're moving from building general fitness to training, those guardrails start to come in a little bit more, and they narrow and narrow because, we don't want to waste time. We want a minimum effective dose of exposure to build adaptation, but that also requires us to be a little bit more specific.
Right. Yeah. I think, Mike, I mean, even like in my situation, like now I'm doing like this Squattober stuff. It's like a training they put out every day, like a squat, like a workout. But I'm not exactly training for my marathon right now. So this is just a really great way to build general strength. So it's
Yeah.
not like structured in a way for runners. It's just a fun, it's fun. Like I forgot who it's actually like Squattober or something like that. And it's like every day during the week. I don't follow it exclusively because I have days I do want to do like a workout and it's hard. I have to kind of take a day off from the lifting to do that workout the next day. Otherwise my legs are a little bit tired. So I structure it. I'm following it basically though. I'm pretty much on. I just might do some of the workouts on the weekend or whatever. And I've been doing that and just to build general strength. And then I'm going to be joining like a gym and doing like more like workout, like almost CrossFit style workouts and then like high rocks style workouts, just to have that general fitness and strength over the next like 3 months. And then and I'm still running, like, but my running is less. It's like maybe 30, maybe 40 miles a week, which is like really half the amount of what I do when I'm like in marathon training. And then I might do other like cross training rowing, just stuff that I feel like doing to keep my general fitness and just keep in shape, basically keep the fitness I have the best I can and build strength. And then I might do December, which is another thing. Just because I like it, is just I enjoy it. But I wouldn't, if I were training for my marathon, I wouldn't be doing that. I would not be doing that. And then come probably around February or March, that's when things change. Now I'm going down to that strength training a couple times a week, and I'm like building up my mileage, and everything is very, very like those guardrails come in very narrow, right? And it narrows and narrows and then when I'm in the bulk of it in March and April and May, like it's marathon, everything I'm doing is very specific to that marathon. So that is kind of my own personal example of how that looks. And I think that kind of goes back to our off season kind of talk too, for people who are seasoned runners and have goals. It is okay to kind of have a part of your training plan during the year, like a season of like maybe just staying general fitness, just kind of having some fun with it, doing the workouts, whatever one you feel like, I'm going to pick this one today, like just to kind of keep engaged and have fun with it. But you can't really be doing that when you have a very specific goal, because then those workouts, I mean, there might be aspects of it that are helpful, but you're, I think, setting yourself up for maybe not having the goal, achieving the goal you want, because those workouts probably aren't as specific as they need to be. So yeah, I think that's an example. So yeah, I don't know if you want to, do you have any other?
No, I think we've covered this one pretty good.
It pretty well. Yeah. Leaving it with that last example.
Yeah, that was perfect. Yeah. So we want to thank everyone. So let's do a little bit of housekeeping here at the end. We do have the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group that's on Facebook. You just go in and you just answer a simple question. We'll let you in, trying to build a community. While we build this, at some stage, there will be additional content that we'll release. This is a great way to interact with others that are listening to the podcast, ask questions. You can reach out to us directly, offer ideas for topics that you would like to see discussed, and we'll get to a point where we start to issue like Q&A kind of things, and we'll have Q&A podcast episodes. So go out and check that out at the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast group. If you would like to reach out to either Katie and I, you can use our podcast email. So it's the Endurance Athlete Journey at gmail.com. I don't think the word podcast is in there. So reach out to us if you would like to, if you would like to. Wherever you're listening to your podcast, whether that be on Spotify, Amazon, iTunes, or what have you, leave us a review. If you find the podcast interesting and content is helping you along your athlete journey, give us a comment. You can leave up to 5 stars. We would highly appreciate that. We also have a YouTube channel that I do want to start drawing some attention to. If you would like to not just listen to the podcast, but actually see us face to face, you can do so on the YouTube channel. So it's just the Endurance Athlete Journey on YouTube. All of our content and all of our podcasts are out there as well. So we post them both audio only, and then the video ones are out there too. Both of us are also taking on athletes on our active rosters. So if you are interested in coaching, you can check out Katie at fuel2run.com, where she focuses on runners and nutrition for all sports. You can reach out to me. I specialize in multi-sport and single sport, so swim, bike, run, triathlon. You can reach out to me at tabularasaracing.com. Both of us have pretty solid websites, so you can check out our coaching philosophies and some of our past performances, and just check out some of the content that we've got. I think both of us have blogs that are listed on our websites as well, so you can see some of the additional content that we've produced as coaches. I think that's the extent of all the housekeeping. So I want to thank everybody for. Did I miss anything, Katie?
No, I think we got it. Yeah, I think that's
solid.
Good.
All right, so thank you everybody for joining us on this episode of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. As I said, this was episode 38. And so look forward to coming to you again next week. Keep an eye out for the bonus casts that are coming out on Tuesdays, which is my weekly training wrap up for Florida 70.3. That's in December. So I've been pushing out weekly episodes talking about how the training is going. I'm just on the other side of 50% of the training plans. Check those out as a little bonus cast. So that's it. We thank you guys for joining, and we will see you all again next week. Listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast. Like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to leave us up to a 5-star review on iTunes and Spotify, because leaving a review really helps others like you find us. Visit the podcast website for other episodes of the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast at enduranceathletejourney.buzzsprout.com. Have questions or comments about the podcast? Send Coach Justin and Katie an email at theenduranceathletejourney@gmail.com. For all things coaching, visit Coach Katie at fuel2run.com and Coach Justin at tabularasaracing.com. Again, thank you for listening to the Endurance Athlete Journey podcast, and remember to find joy in the journey.